This is chapter 6, part 3. All right, we're going to continue on talking about some of these issues with the connections between drugs and law enforcement. Let's pick it up with this next point. Street level operations are the responsibility of a number of levels of agencies: federal agencies, state agencies, or local law enforcement. Increasingly, these different agencies are joining forces and working together to form multi-jurisdictional drug task forces. And a lot of this has to do with sort of the complex nature of drug trafficking and how there's a lot of mobility involved. Distributing, moving these products from one state to another, from one locale to another, from one country to another. And so if the bigger the operation, the more levels of law enforcement that you need to bring into this, and they need to be coordinated, working together to be able to to gather evidence and be able to arrest these individuals. And so because of the complex nature of all of this, of these operations, you have these increasingly different levels of government working together, forming task force, basically just partnering together to try to put together, the evidence, the cases against various individuals. And this is another way, it's a theme that I often stress in these criminal justice courses, is that over time, gradually, either slower or faster, the federal government has gotten involved in more and more and more criminal justice activities. The country was founded with the idea that crime was a local issue and would be handled by cities, by counties, by states. But as the country has grown larger, more complicated, more sophisticated, there is a strong tendency for centralization, and that just means that more and more power in Washington, D.C., and more involvement by the federal government in what in the past were considered more local issues. Multi-jurisdictional task forces allow agencies at different levels of government to share funds, personnel, and intelligence, meaning, information, and allow drug agents to track drug traffickers across many different jurisdictions. Three major strategies for disrupting street-level drug markets can be employed. Number one, police-only approaches like hotspots policing, where operations such as crackdowns and raids, as well as undercover operations and intensive patrolling, are conducted within a geographically small, drug-ridden area. So usually there's concentrations, depends on the city, but in a lot of times big cities you'll have certain areas, certain neighborhoods where the movement of drugs, the sales of drugs, purchasing of drugs happens in a quite concentrated area. And so you certainly have this police-only type of approach. A very popular one currently is this hotspots policing, where you sort of track where are crimes most concentrated and sort of allocating a lot of resources, personnel, energy, attention to these hotspots in the hope that you'll be able to catch people and have probable cause to make arrests for drug operations in these neighborhoods. The second level is a community-wide type of approach, less focus on a particular neighborhood, and more on all levels of community through the use of community improvement partnerships. This is an old theme that if you've studied law enforcement very much, is the traditional way of doing law enforcement is the police department tries to achieve its goals basically on its own. Independently, self-reliance, that sort of thing. But there's a different approach, a different philosophy, community policing. The idea being that if you really want to be effective at law enforcement, you need to bring in community organizations. You need the community to help you fight crime. You need them on board. You need them cooperating with you. You need them on your side, and not sort of seeing law enforcement, as being an occupying force, some external, threatening, unwelcome presence. You want to You don't want to have those kind of negative relations with the community. So the community type approaches advocate, hey, let's all work together. Let's join forces with different organizations and see what they have to say about fighting crime, about enforcing the law, get their input, get their cooperation, get their positive attitude, and then work together in that fashion. Number 3 is the geographically focused community approaches, types of approaches. And these are all similar sorts of things, but here we're talking about a grander, you got multiple groups working together, but again, since you do have communities that have this problem far worse than others, it does make sense to have some focus on geography. Where's the problem? Where are the neighborhoods? Where are the areas that have the concentrations of these sales and perhaps drug use as well? And let's have focus, because you want to go to where the problem is. You don't want to devote a lot of resources and time and personnel to where the problem doesn't exist much, right? So that's just an more efficient way to kind of approach it. Focus on where the problem lies. Studies on street-level drug enforcement strategies have underscored the importance of community involvement in accomplishing a reduction in street-level drug trafficking. That's often a message that comes from researchers, academics, people who engage in research, is that there's a tendency to really see value in community involvement, in law enforcement, not going it alone, but working in tandem, developing partnerships with different communities, community organizations, I should say, just folks in the community who have organized in different ways to try to help solve community problems, and working with those kind of folks to try to improve law enforcement in the area. For street-level enforcement of drug laws, police departments use undercover operations that include the following: the reverse sting, the controlled buy, the buy bust, and the buy walk. Let's go over some of this. Again, I'm not going to cover everything in the chapter due to time, but you definitely want to, as you're reading through the chapter and studying the chapter, you definitely want to hit sections that seem important, but maybe a little bit too detailed for me to cover a lot here. Spend a little extra time on those, just so you're covering all the important bases, right? You got all the important areas covered. Now, the reverse sting, let's talk about it first. It's a drug law enforcement operation in which undercover agents pose as drug dealers and sell a controlled substance or imitation version of a controlled substance to buyers. Okay, so these are undercover agents. Okay, people who are working for law enforcement, who are pretending to be drug dealers, who are selling this substance, either real or fake, to buyers. In the controlled buy operation, an undercover informant buys the drug under the supervision of police. So here you've got an informant, somebody who's working in cooperation with the police, who in an undercover fashion buys the drug while they're working with law enforcement. The informant may be a paid informant or a person who's been been convinced by agents to roll over on other traffickers because they themselves have been charged with the possession or trafficking of an illicit drug. So one way or another, you convince this informant to work with you to help, with their connections, the people they know on the streets, to help facilitate the arrest of someone, presumably somebody kind of higher up in the chain. That's often the hopes of these law enforcement officers. In a buy-bust operation, an undercover agent makes a buy, and immediately thereafter, the seller is arrested for the drug sale. So you buy it, undercover person buys it, and then you caught him red-handed, so you arrest him right there on the spot. A cover team monitors the transaction via surveillance equipment. So you have somebody who's working with the undercover agent, surveilling the scene, using equipment, surveilling the scene in a hidden way. After a bust signal, there's a signal that the the drug transaction has occurred, and now it's time to move in and make an arrest. After that bus signal is given, by the undercover agent, a cover team rapidly moves in to make the arrest. Generally, the undercover agent is also quote unquote arrested to protect his or her identity. So the law enforcement just pretends that buyer is a criminal and arrests them just like everybody else, treats them just the same. But secretly, this buyer is working with law enforcement, and later on would be released and wouldn't be punished for the crime since they're cooperating with law enforcement. But they're doing everything secretly, covertly, to protect the identity, so people won't figure out that this person's actually working with law enforcement, because that would get them in a lot of trouble on the street to be cooperating with the police. In a buy-walk operation, an undercover agent buys drugs but does not make the arrest on the spot, does not arrest the drug dealer at the time of the dealer. The drug deal is used to get a warrant from a judge for the dealer that is served the warrant at a later time, served the warrant and arrested at a later time. See, so this is a good way to do it, where we got the goods, we got the evidence, but maybe it's not most strategic to arrest right on the spot. We don't have any reason to think that this drug dealer is going to take off, going to disappear, or has any knowledge that we now have dirt on them and we now have evidence on them. And so you come back later with a warrant, and then you make the arrest in a surprise fashion. That's a buy-walk operation. The advantage of this operation is that it protects the identity of the undercover agent, very important, while at the same time ensuring his or her immediate safety during the time of the operation. So we're talking about protection of identity, keeping everything secret, and also because it's a safer way to make the arrest. Make this arrest later on, surprise, at your timing, you plan it, and as opposed to this more dangerous situation where you're making an arrest right during a transaction, which may be less ideal and maybe riskier, maybe more dangerous. Entrapment. Now we're getting to all these terms. Of course, terms always important in these chapters. Whether I speak about them in these lectures or not, make sure you know them. By entrapment, we mean inducing the arrestee, the person who's getting arrested, to commit a crime that was not contemplated beforehand. That's the key thing. It's inappropriate to get somebody to commit a crime by planting an idea in their head that was not there in their head first of all. So you as somebody who's trying to sort of induce or get somebody to commit a legal transaction, you cannot put the idea in their head if it was not there already. So they need to be the one to come up with the idea to commit the crime, not you. So to do so is entrapment. It's inappropriate. It's kind of tricking or sort of luring the person into committing the crime who didn't have the idea to commit the crime in the first place. Police agents engaging in a form of undercover operation must show clearly that coercive or persuasive tactics were not used. So you're not trying to force or push or twist somebody's arm into committing a crime. That's not supposed to be part of it. It must also be demonstrated that the idea of committing the crime came from the defendant himself or herself, not from the police agent. Okay, that we've already stressed that. Non-undercover operations include, number 1, the knock and talk, 2, the raid, and 3, the crackdown. The knock and talk is used when officials receive information that an individual is dealing drugs but do not have probable cause to seek a search warrant. Agents arrive at a suspect's residence, knock on the door, identify themselves as police officers, and ask permission to enter the residence. So you're just doing everything by permission. Once inside, agents ask the suspect if anyone in the residence is producing or dealing drugs. After the suspect responds to the allegations, agents ask for permission to search the residence for any illegal drugs. So this is just, it sounds kind of weird to hear this type of approach, but it's all just doing everything through permission, getting permission from these individuals to do take all these steps towards, in the end, you're searching and potentially finding drugs in their place. So again, this might surprise you, but this is frequently done because approximately, according to the research, 75 to 80%, so we're talking a very high number of drug dealers waive their constitutional rights to privacy and consent to a search. They don't know any better. They don't know that they can say, no, you cannot come into my house. No, you cannot search my house, my apartment, whatever. No, you cannot do that. And then if you tell them no, that they can't do it. They, constitutionally, they are prohibited from entering your home and searching when they don't have your permission or they don't have a warrant. So that's why law enforcement is using this, because a lot of times you get people to comply by saying yes, go ahead. They're waiving their constitutional right. Next is the raid. Let's pick that up in the next segment.